Hi there. You're in my kitchen now. Okay, so... Good God. So, you're probably wondering, Josh, where's your nice chair? Where's your fun background of random stuff that's been taped up onto the wall? Well, this is what we call in the industry an offline segment, mainly because if anybody was at the stream the other night, my head was a bit foggy, wasn't really feeling super well, but thanks to modern medicine and some sleep, I feel a lot better today. So with that being said, I want to pick up and kind of summarize what I was speaking about and kind of make my points a little bit more succinctly. So we're going to do that here on this. So this past week, we have seen a mass shooting in Tennessee at a Christian elementary school. The other facts of the case we know are that the person identifies as trans. There were 3 kids and 3 adults who lost their lives due to this event, and it was done with 2 AR style rifles. I don't know what they were specifically, and at least a pistol. So let's get into this. So I've been hearing a lot of people, if you've been around the internet, you might have seen, I think, about 3 different explanations. The first one being that this was a crime, this was a horrendous act committed because the perpetrator was trans. Now, unfortunately, there's not a lot of evidence that people who have been pushing this to actually demonstrate that. I point to this graph right here, found by Socked on Left. Kind of a, not exactly the violent group that you would presume that trans people are. So that doesn't really work out super well. The other explanation is possible Christian phobia. This is to say the same way we had Islamophobia after 9/11. Are we seeing that kind of sentiment in the United States? Well, I have this fun graph to demonstrate that we are. Just gonna leave this here. All these data points. Anyway, third reason that I've seen is, the third reason is one that a caller called in last night with the explanation of, which was psychopathy. The person was just crazy. To wit, we have to ask ourselves, do we get anything out of this? Is there anything we can glean from this then? What do we do with that information? To wit, I believe that there are a few pieces of legislation that might help. So let's take a look at those really quickly. The first of these we need to look at are universal background checks. These are pretty widely supported by gun owners in the United States. I think these are a pretty reasonable, pretty standard legislation to pass, which Congress has yet to do so. They should probably do that. The second one is something that I think that we should be implementing, which is what I would call dual firearm registration. This would require you to register your firearm in each state and with the federal government. This would be no different than the form that you fill out if you live in a registration state. This would simply add one more line of information that would go to the federal government. The rest of it would stay with the states. Some states, such as here in Colorado, don't have registration laws. That should probably change. Going forward, I think that people who are found having unregistered firearms, or if there are unregistered firearms found through the legal system, those should be confiscated and re-registered into the system. They certainly could be put back up for sale at some point. Thirdly, national red flag laws. When I think of red flag laws, I want a standard that stretches across the United States for red flag laws here in our great country. I want the ability for people to report people who are acting suspiciously or are suspected to be a danger to themselves or others. This is a pretty basic one. Many states have already passed a few of these. I just think we need to come up with a national standard. The fourth one of these, which might be a little bit controversial, cartridge restrictions. That is to say, also caliber restrictions, depending on whichever word you like to use, to identify rounds of ammunition. Plain and simple, I've yet to really see an argument or really a need for average, regular Americans, private citizens, for owning anything really above the .45 ACP caliber. It's not really something that, you see a lot of use cases for. Obviously, if you'd like to go hunting, you could fill out a permit and be permitted to buy ammo to go hunting. I got no problem with that. Same with other sporting. If you're participating in range shooting or sport shooting, got no problem with whatever caliber you want to be firing. That's all well and good. What I am talking about is the private ownership and stockpiling of high-grade ammunition. The fifth one of these I think we should be implementing is some form of storage requirements. I believe that there's no reason why a responsible gun owner should not have their firearms stored safely. This is a pretty easy one. I don't really think it's super controversial. Too many times we see kids get a hold of firearms that they never should because their gun-owning parents are irresponsible with those firearms. I want to see a reduction in that. I want to see that cut down. And finally, a gun buyback program. Plain and simple, this wouldn't be a requirement or mandatory, but I do think there should be a system for people, if they're willing to give up their firearms, to be compensated for such a thing. So I want to speak briefly and a little bit about what I think is the actual problem going on right now, where our concerns should be. To which I point to right-wing punditry. Right-wing pundits are using this single event to push for the stripping and the demonization of trans people broadly. They're doing this through the hyperfixation of this shooter's identity, something in which they've been rather interested in not fixating on other shooters. Or if they do, they would like to explain why it happens. None of that nuance seems to be, seems to come up when we talk about trans people. You see, Tucker Carlson on his Thursday show said all of this.
Like all totalitarians, they want a monopoly on force. We're not against people, American citizens, carrying firearms, having firearms. We support it, including trans people. It's fine. But what you're watching here is not the exercise of the Second Amendment.
So have you ever heard that before? Have you ever heard the right wing ever talk about any gun owner as, not properly expressing their Second Amendment rights? Do you notice that? Because every single time there's been a shooter, every single time there's been an event, every single time any of this has happened, it's not about the kind of expression. It's not about the goal of the expression of your Second Amendment rights. It's simply the fact in their mind that you have a right to own firearms. Full stop. But now, with Tucker Carlson, we are seeing a deviation from that. So that's what Tucker was saying before the shooting. Let's take a look and see what he's saying now afterwards.
We seem to be watching the rise of trans terrorism.
Now, it's funny he would say that because as far as we know, and again, trans people don't really commit a lot of crime. We've kind of seen that with this graph that I showed earlier.
Trans ideology claims dominion over nature itself. Christians can never agree with this statement because these are powers they believe God alone possesses. So Christianity and transgender orthodoxy are wholly incompatible theologies. They can never be reconciled. They are on a collision course with each other.
It's a bit odd, isn't it, that Tucker Carlson would come on to his program, talk about, trans people are allowed to own firearms, but they're not doing it the right way, which I've never heard him say. But also he comes on this program to make a point that trans people and Christians are incompatible, that there's no way that we can live in the same country. Now, if you were around during 9/11 and in the immediate aftermath, we heard the exact same thing about people of Muslim faith, that they were incompatible with the United States. And did you not? And if you did live back then, you probably know that hate crimes to Muslim Americans rose quite exponentially, actually. Keep in mind, this is the environment that Tucker Carlson is trying to create. Funnily enough, he already kind of laid out how that process works on his Thursday show. We'll get to that a little bit later, but let's continue to see what he said afterwards.
The man who tried to murder Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh after the repeal of Roe v. Wade, identified as a, quote, trans gamer girl, man who shot up a nightclub in Colorado in this past November, and murdered 5 people identified as non-binary.
What actually seems to be happening is his lawyers were looking to use that identification as a way to skate around hate crime charges, which doesn't seem to have worked as far as I know, but also, again, there hasn't been any evidence that they actually were legitimately non-binary. Seems like they were just trolling, but the troll is good enough for Tucker Carlson's level of reporting.
The trans movement is targeting Christians, including with violence. Most Christian leaders in this country don't want to admit that. Admitting it might force them to take deeply unfashionable positions. But it is true.
And see, there we have it. Tucker Carlson talks a lot and says the word true and truth a lot. But if you notice, if you watch his program, does he really bring up, especially in this case, a whole lot of facts, a lot of truth? Or is he just kind of waving at generalities? Because you see, Tucker Carlson knows that his audience has already been stirred up and made to think that trans people are scary, that they're leading to the downfall of Western civilization in the United States. But unfortunately, what he's actually doing is stirring up hate for a group because one singular member committed one crime kind of recently. Is this a group problem or is this an individual problem? You see, Tucker Carlson doesn't want to talk about group problems when it's white people, when it's militias, when it's Christian nationalists, when it's incel communities online, misogynist communities online. He has no interest in talking about those groups and their behavior. He only is interested in the behavior of trans people, an entire broad identity encompassing, I'm sure there's some trans conservatives out there. But he would rather identify all of them as violent due to the actions of one person, a standard he would not meet with any other group, keep in mind. And the second part of that is also the damning part, because Tucker Carlson would like to grant himself the arbiter of true Christianity, that the real Christians recognize this threat, and the non-real Christians, the ones who don't have the guts to tell their congregations the truth, they're not the real Christians.
Yesterday's massacre happened because of a deranged and demonic ideology.
Now again, when we talk about a rise, what Tucker Carlson is referring to is literally a single event that caused the death of 6 people. Certainly a significant one. But when we talk about the rise of trans terror, this is the classic. This is a classic example of making a mountain out of a molehill. If you've ever heard that expression, it's a bit older, I understand. But my point in saying that is, where's the rise? Again, I point to this here fun chart. Show me where the wave of trans people committing crimes is. Let alone violent crimes. But Tucker doesn't need to do that, does he? He just kind of says it. And because you've seen one on TV recently, it's fresh in your mind. Again, Tucker Carlson does the classic, a single member of a group, as long as they're not a Christian white male, is the arbiter of an entire movement. You see, there's been exactly one shooting committed by a trans person, in the last, 12 months, I'd say? And suddenly, this is a problem with the movement. Now, does Tucker Carlson say this about the white supremacist movement online? Does Tucker Carlson say this about the Christian nationalist movement in the United States? Does Tucker Carlson say this about the violent militias that took part in the January 6 riots? Surprisingly, he doesn't, even though those are much more organized groups of people, which you would think he would be so concerned, since we can demonstrate certainly a lot more white, Christian, male crime trends than we can trans people. Interesting that, no? So I mentioned earlier that this is the problem. I started this by saying, let's talk about the real problem here. And this is what the real problem is that this single event is going to be used as a rallying cry, as a legitimizing moment for the rights of trans people to be restricted. Tucker Carlson already doesn't think that when trans people buy guns, they're exercising their Second Amendment right. Tucker Carlson already believes that trans people are trying to infect your children with their transness. Tucker Carlson already believes that trans people and Christians, the largest religious group by plurality, I believe, in the United States, are incompatible with each other. Keep in mind, this isn't specific. Keep in mind, it's not just Tucker Carlson. There is also these lovely Twitter users right here, along with thousands upon other Twitter users, probably millions, right now writing their villain speeches as to why they had to do what they had to do to trans people before trans people did whatever trans people want to do to them in the future. So I'm going to leave you with this other clip. It's from Thursday. Tucker Carlson went on to explain the system, the process in which how you radicalize somebody by fear. Now, he claimed that NPR was engaging in this, which, whatever you think of that is, keep in mind all of the clips I've shown you today, and I'm going to leave you with one more clip of Tucker Carlson. You all have a lovely day. I'll see you on Thursday, and yeah, that's about it.
Same template always. Scare the crap out of your voters, tell them that their lives are at risk, encourage them to get guns. How do you think that ends?
The thing that they tell, like at the end of all YouTube videos where they tell you to like click on one of these like things to watch more videos. Yeah, I've been meaning to film one of those. So that's what I was doing. I was just setting it up to film one.